Okay, so here we are in the second video from 1812. The first video, I had some issues where I went into too much personal stuff and too much not this game stuff. Briefly, look, Russia's on the verge of collapse. It should have collapsed last turn, but the chip pull ended up such that things were kind of scrambled. For whatever reason, the next turn is going to be, well, because it's summer, the next turn is going to be fixed, which means things might be a little different than, they're not going to face the same randomness that they do in the other turns. And that's what's really hard to justify. Although, again, you could put it in with, there was some bad weather right at the end of the period or something. But still, even talking about that, it's like, look, why are you determining it at the end of the turn that, that Russia falls, has to fall only if everything's in supply at the end of the turn? And I would have had an opportunity, it really came down to the chit pull as to whether or not Russia would fall. And it's hard to blame weather on that, right? The forces are either in supply or they aren't for the majority of the time. It shouldn't really matter some little timing of weather or something. You can extend that and make it a little bit more complex and come up with a story of why Russia didn't fall because of some bad weather in the spring or something like that. But it's just, it just doesn't feel right? This is the same kind of problem that I had with another Compass game, the God Kings, at a very different level. The straight I go, you go, while it has its problems, you can kind of say, look, there's a pattern and everything works according to a certain way. And it's kind of, once you accept that concession that everything's not moving at once, one side is moving at once, the other side is moving at once. Once you kind of accept that, you can be like, yeah, and it makes sense that at the end of the turn or at the end of a player turn, certain things are assessed and a decision is made based on that. But here, there's this randomization of chits, and then in summer, there's no possibility of randomization, so we can all actually evaluate exactly which chit. Now, there's a little bit of randomization in the numbers on the chits. In particular, if I don't know who's got what. Okay, so both sides have 3-point chits, which means if a player's last chit is going to be the 4-point chit, that does change the narrative a little bit. But I think the key narrative is actually going to be surrounding being able to hit the French forces while they're out of supply, although I don't really think the Russians can do that because they've separated their forces. This was the thing with Bennigsen not coming up with Kutuzov, but I didn't want to lose too many strength points. They could conceivably from here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nah, they wouldn't be able to hit. Now they could set themselves up for a forced march though, and that would solve, or at least alleviate some of the problems to some extent. I don't know. Anyway, we've got Spaniards coming in through the south of France. We've got the English landing in the south of France. We've got English over here. We've got Austrians plowing into Germany. The majority of the French army is in Russia, hoping to finish them off. I think their chances of an automatic victory are just about nil at this point. So I'm not really sure. I made the argument that, yeah, France and Russia, neither one really wants to end this war on terms that are a little easier on the other side. But honestly, maybe the French are a little less concerned with knocking the Russians out. It's getting so late. We would have to have everybody pretty much. We would have to, I think, knock out either Austria or Spain. And Spain obviously is not going to be the case. We would have to knock out Austria this year, I think, to get what I would say is a viable solution for the continental system. Just looking at the points, right? Of course, the continental system is officially, as far as I can tell, it's in effect kind of no matter what, which means France's automatic victory is trivial. Like, they don't have to invade Britain, and they just have to take all their continental system stuff, but whatever. That, not continental, all their GE, so they'd have to like absorb Piedmont, which technically should be absorbed already as far as I can tell from the history, but whatever. But yeah, it's really kind of up in the air whether or not I decide that the continental system's in place. But I feel like knocking Russia out and Austria out before the end of the year would be sufficient. And that's an interesting issue because with the French army in Russia, it actually could get into Austria. The Austrians trying to put pressure to make a French surrender happen. It might end up this sort of race situation where France might, be on the verge of falling and Austria is on the verge of falling, which is kind of interesting for whatever it's worth. There's another French army up here, 4 of the 5, which could actually, with a forced march, establish supplies to the French or hit Vitebsk. So 2, 3. We could actually bypass Pskov, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to here. The whole issue is getting Vitebsk, but from Masovia that would be hard because the terrain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and either one could get in there. So it's something to think about. But the important thing is Sushum's army is a little smaller. And it's closer to the Austrians and whatnot, so might be able to influence stuff there. I'm just trying to figure out what, I'm doing the reinforcements and whatnot to set up for the summer turn. The easier solution is to just cart supplies over and then move the Napoleonic armies forward. I don't know that I particularly want Soule to do the work, though. Alone, that feels painful. But with a forced march, that means it gives Bennigsen a chance to get into the fight. Land 4. I moved down from St. Pete with this because I might want to do a forced march with him. However, it is getting to be dawn. I'm feeling a little tired. I think I don't particularly need to play right now. It's this guy. If he was a 4 rank, a 4 initiative, but I don't think I have a 4 initiative except for the Egyptians, which I don't feel like I'm allowed to use without the Egyptian army in place. I feel like I've lost a good leader somewhere. Oh, it's this guy. Yeah, okay. Puzzled out it's Friday. I might take a little nap, I don't know. It's like 1 o'clock now, but in terms of diplomacy, I don't see anything major, but I think I'm going to want to throw the Scorched Earth into play at this point. Buy myself a little time, make things harder on the French make some attrition checks, especially on the out of supply units. Now, this is kind of weird because it's every enemy force. What qualifies as enemy? I don't think the term is defined in the game. One side of it could say, well, I'm at war with, but another side could just say, hey, I'm not allied with. I'm going to go with the I'm at war with because pretty clearly I don't want the Russians to be having to roll attrition checks as well, but I don't know. The French ended up taking 5 hits off of that throughout several different stacks. The Turks took 3, including a cav, all off of 1 hit on their main army. They got a really terrible roll. Right. Without being out of supply, they got just horrible. I guess we can pull a chip. It's like I already did. I moved those guys. So diplomacy I shouldn't have even been thinking about. But it did get me thinking about that card and the fact that, hey, the French might be able to establish supply lines. Fuck them. Let's hurt them a little. All right, we got something cute, which maybe only happens in... I mean, it can happen elsewhere. England and Spain are not allied. They're also not enemies. The game is agnostic, as far as I can tell in the rules, as to whether or not I can move English forces into here to siege this. I'm actually thinking about doing a naval move to do that, in order to sort of short circuit. The Spaniards, I don't want the Spaniards in there. It's kind of interesting. There's stacking rules having to do with allied forces. I mean, we got allied armies here, which has to do with who's going to be in command. But there doesn't seem to be any limit. The limit of allied steps must be less than the number of steps of the same nationality in the army counter. They do say in a single hex there can be only 1 force, but you can attack the enemy by moving into their hex. It might be covered in the surrender rules in some sort of way where you have to unstack if you're no longer allied, but I think that's actually handled by one side having to leave the country. I'll look because I'm not certain that that's the case actually. But there's sort of this weird situation where, and again, it could happen in the case of, like, you know, France, Prussia has surrendered to France. France could move units through a Prussian stack. And I think we actually had that at one point with someone stacked on top of a French depot, which didn't feel like too terrible a thing. Again, there's plenty of room in the hexes for multiple forces, but there would be a serious question of who gets to siege if, like, 2 non-aligned forces move up against a location. That feels a little bit more iffy. Yeah. The closest I can find here is during the mandatory peace, the victor's units can cross the territories of defeated power and its minor allies' territories, even stop within. Stacking of units belonging to the 2 nations is possible, and each country must separately obey stacking rules. Interesting. I don't know the timing within that, like, with the Brits, you know, since they're activated on the same phase, who would get to choose to go first to do the siege. I would guess Spain would. I'm guessing it goes in diplomacy order. That might actually be covered. What happens when two people are in the same block, well, are using the same chit? There we go. Yeah, the diplomacy phase order would indeed take place. So the Spaniards would go first. But maybe the English could table talk them into leaving, because it's in both players' favor for England to take, what is this, Montpellier? Yeah. Anywho, we used a naval chit to rearrange and get a lot more forces here into Toulon. And the channel's better defended in case any kind of attack happens, any kind of opportunity happens to open that up. With the French moving into France, that's more of a risk now. It's not really, because there's like one loose French fleet or squadron that I could have bottled up. That could cause me some issues, conceivably. I didn't notice it, but I don't think there's much I can do about it with what's happened so far. Anyhow, we're going to stop there. Up here early Sunday morning, like around 2, sleeping a lot. I'm in a bit of a tricky situation here in terms of the game. I am also in life, but that's something different. I already started the summer turn. Kind of like to get to the end of it, but it's going to be over 100 degrees for this next week coming up, starting tomorrow, and or right around 100 in some cases, which means I'm not going to want to be up here, and lots of disincentives, whatever, lead me towards wanting to do something else instead. So yeah, I got something else I'm reading the rules to, but I'm in the midst of this, and I don't know. I'm not going to get through the fucking year tonight, I assume. I could go crazy. I could go crazy. But yeah. So I don't know where I'm going to go. I might end up cutting this video at the end of the summer, if I can get through that tonight, and which seems like a feasible possibility. In terms of life, unfortunately, I ran into something I forgot about, where I need a phone for something, and that threw me into a bit of a tailspin, because ever since Skype went away, I haven't really been able to deal with a phone. Now, I have a little flip phone somewhere up here. I also have a couple of smartphones, but of my wife's. I don't know where the flip phone got itself to. There it is. That I was sent by, I had sort of the cheapest kind of phone you can get, right? I paid about $100 a year, which to me seemed like it was exorbitant when Skype was like $30 a year. But it gave me a phone number, and I would get, I had thousands and thousands of minutes on the damn thing. But then the website that I was supposed to be able to register to switch over to the new phone that they sent me for free, and I don't know if that'll even work anymore, ended up not allowing me to change over. So I said, fuck it, I'm tired of paying the $100 a year for something I really don't use. However, and especially since by the time that happened, I was living here, and that means I had my own phone from work and all kind of funky shit like that. You know, it was... Anyway, let's pull some chits, see what we can get done. I realized I cheated. Empire Land, Coalition Naval Empire Land. I don't think I did anything in that Empire Land move. Not absolutely positive. Yeah, I did. I moved. Did I move anything? I don't think I did. I don't think I did. So I'm going to throw that back in the cup and do the Coalition Land move. It's possible. No, the Turks didn't move either. Yeah, I really don't think I moved anything. Cool. The fault of me, but the reason I made the error is this Coalition Naval looks like the Coalition Land. It's got a number on it. It looks exactly like it to me. It's even got the same symbol on the top. No, not that that would be enough to convince me. If it looks, you know, close enough from this distance, I'm just gonna, you know, just kind of record it as that. I may have pulled some Coalition land markers and thrown them back in. Anyway, this is legitimate. Let's go with it. One reinforcement thing that I'm going to change. I'm going to dismiss Alexander and replace him with Tormasov. This is cheating again. But the Polish army is small enough he can command it now, and I do not want Alexander in there. Because he will take command over any multi-army group that I'm able to form. Moving pieces, I'm getting this feeling of, oh fuck, I really hate playing this game. I started shifting the Russians up, and I started trying to think about, hey, what can I do to protect, you know, maybe my supply line or whatever, if it comes down to that. Well, got this big force here, it's reliant on Vitebsk. There is nowhere else I can draw supplies from. That means I could get cut by like an army here or a smaller force here, which would, you know, well, no. Yeah, because I can't move across that. Yeah, I basically, no, I could do this way. 1, 2, 3, 4 to here, but that's just a Cossack. That's not a detachment. What about these guys? 1, 2, 3, 4. I could spread these out. That would give me a secondary supply line down. I'm trying to worry more about that because there's, you know, definitely some potential problem. Actually, I don't really care. I'm sitting here. Fuck it. I don't care. I'm sitting on a supply source. I'm literally in perfectly good shape there. Okay. But yeah, I have to worry about those kind of things because it is possible to put, you know, forces into kind of a problematic situation. Of course, could just dart a supply wagon down to here and get it out of Tula or something. I don't know. I just feel like I'm expending so much effort on a system that really just comes to build the biggest stack you can and smack the enemy with that and hope for the best. Which just is not that much fun. It reminds me of Imperium Romanum too. And yeah, I've got, do I need to move other things? Well, this is the first of the Coalition land chits. So unless something is in danger, and I kind of felt like this was in danger, it's possible the French could set up supplies and move themselves into a position, you know, where they've got a coordinated attack on me. But I don't think there's anywhere else where I'm in that kind of danger. I'm just looking over mainly the Austrian front more than anything else, and I think I'm okay. But I don't want to play anymore. You know, like I came up here with the let's get the season out of the way. But I just don't fucking want to do this shit. One thing that I have to my advantage is I do have the new camera, and I have a memory card for that, or I could swap the memory cards, and run whatever else I'm playing, and just say fuck this for a while. But I kind of like to get to the end of a turn, rather than leaving myself someplace like this where I come back and find out, oh look, I cheated. More chits. In Empire Land 3, the Empire's gotten their 4 and their 3 out of the way. I don't particularly want to use either one because it's summer and I don't have any rush. Coalition got their 1 and 2 played. This is one of the places where the Chit Cup can really intervene. Yeah, for the most part, 3s are good for everyone still, but, you know, it's possible you might have leaders that you kind of have to move on the 1 and 2. And without leaders, the 1 and 2 are also vital because, well, the 1 is. The 2 for Cossacks, but the 1 is what you can move things without leaders with. Now, that brings me to the other thing that I wanted to mention here, which was I'm going to move some Austrians because they have detachments at this point. But this is one of the kind of annoying factors. Again, I've had my troubles with these army boxes, not knowing which one's which, stuff like that, and I'm not sure why I'm having so much trouble in this game when I don't in other games. Maybe because they're not just numerical or something, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I've played other games where they're not just numerical, but there are a lot of them in this game in some cases. But anyway, that doesn't explain necessarily why I have so much trouble. But what's kind of problematic here is that you have counters on the board which tell you the size that the army can be by the stacking restrictions rules that are fucked up and part of the problem with this game. But you have to actually look in the boxes to see how many troops there are. Again, you're looking in 2 different places. Compare this to, say, the Zucker games. Now, they have a much more expensive process for keeping track of troops, but the Zucker operations have a number of the number of troops are written on the leader. But the leader is where you put the troops. You don't put them in an army box. And then if you look at something like Empires in Arms, the forces that are allowed in each corps are by corps. So you look at a particular corps and you see how big it can be, So yeah, there's bigger corps and smaller corps, but there's not like a distinguishment for the armies. What there is that the commanders can only command a certain number of corps without taking a penalty, which is similar to the leadership on here. But the corps are stacked with the leader. They're not in some off box. So again, it comes to just a more fluid handling. It's just easier to cope with. Anyway, so I'm going to have to compare and do this annoying regular counting. Again, in Empires in Arms, you don't have a lot of loose troops running around. Here, you do for various reasons, just because they can't fit all in the armies. Like, the armies can't hold everything. Now, because this is a summer turn, I can predict exactly what's going to happen. Which is to say, this French army could force march and set up a supply link to these armies. Or I could take Vitebsk and get a supply link to those armies. But the Russians could then force march and keep themselves alive for another turn, if they so wished. There's no reason for me to move during this Empire Land phase. So I'm going to skip again. I've pulled a number of chits without doing anything, which is often the case in the game. There's just, it's like you're trying to play the timing of the chits and trying to control that more than anything else. And outside of summer, the timing involves, I don't want to risk losing a turn, especially in the autumn and winter ones where it's fairly likely that they could fall. But after pulling a few chits and doing some thinking, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to play anymore. I want to go away. I've just sort of expended enough effort that the game, without moving anything, without doing a damn thing. That's the problem. It's well on its way. It was much prettier earlier. It's funny, there's like just a couple of minutes where it's very, very pretty, and then the sunrise gets kind of dull, and I don't know. Same thing with sunsets, I guess, but I went out last night to see the sunset. Anyway, had a couple more chits. Empire Naval. We did some breakout attempts that didn't really work, but then managed to slip the fleet from Roquefort and drive this guy out and collect up ships in Amsterdamster. And can't really come out, but we're putting pressure on the coalition naval, and they've already used their chit. They didn't throw a second in. Does it mean anything? Not really. But we may be getting kind of another little edge on them. At this point, I'm down to the last two chips, and I know how they're going to come out. The Empire land has to go first, then the coalition land. There's, you're not really using chit pull at that point. In fact, the way that it kind of alternates means the chit pull is kind of weird. Anyway, coalition does not want to move with this chit, particularly. This is the 4. The 3 gives me more capabilities, and we passed off. I know I'm going to be moving everything on the next 2 chits. So, even though I still haven't done much, not really wanting to do it at this point. French get the next chit. I decided to advance onto Vitebsk and take that, keeping a supply line open this way and this way. So I have double supply going into there. Moscow is probably, it's not really out of reach, but if my forces are combined there, it would be out of reach. Which means I moved a detachment here to increase my supply line going through here. I could actually, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I put it here, see, the problem is that the Russian army could cut my supply by moving to like here. And there's really not much I can do about that. I can move down out of the Grand Army. I can drop a detachment or something to hold Moscow. I don't have a hell of a lot there that I can leave behind. I guess I'll leave the Young Guard behind to hold it. And then we can move down 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6 gathers me together, so I can't keep moving with them. But I could actually position myself somewhere else and try to prevent that cut. Where else could I be? If I move to here, yeah, see, then there's the problem of being intercepted. I think I'm just going to move here. It's not really appealing because, again, the Russians can delay this another turn. But it puts this marker on here, so even if I'm cut off from supply, all that happens is I don't surrender this turn. I won't have to make a supply check, and I'll be able to fiddle units around and get back into supply again next turn. I'm just basically telling the Russians, look, if you want to, you can take attrition to delay attrition because I'd be rolling, because I'd be forced marching. You can take attrition and delay your surrender another turn. But is that really getting you anywhere in your positioning? Meanwhile, there's the Turks, who probably are getting nothing out of this because France won't allow them to join their bloc. So Russia will only surrender to France and then go pound on the Turks, which will kind of suck. I'm not sure what Russia's victory conditions are. I think they need to take Masovia, or they need to take Warsaw from the Prussians, and Constantinople. Now, taking Constantinople is one of those tricky type of things where I can only do it while Turkey's not surrendering, essentially, because it's the capital. I have to strip off a lot of other territory before I can take it. And it's also a multi-valued area. So I'd have to take a lot of territory to keep Constantinople as a prize of victory. But if I'm just occupying it at the moment, I could actually gain something. Now, ideally, I'd want to already have Masovia because I probably, can't hold Constantinople while I'm at war with Prussia. Russia will have had the has been conquered status if they surrender to France. So they cannot actually win through automatic victory. So, yeah. I don't feel like there's status quo peace. There's this free peace alignment. I don't know how to justify that. It feels to me like if France and Russia come to some sort of agreement, if Russia were to give away more than they're giving in their peace conditions, they sure the hell shouldn't get that hasn't been conquered. But again, it's okay, but does that mean that, some kind of territory trading agreement or something along those lines would also count as conquest? I don't know. Wow, the sunlight really shows all the crap I got on the board off real nicely. Dust, hair, all kind of stuff. I used to have this issue with Europa Universalis all the time. That map shows it worse, but yeah, you can see how much. And I'd take a little brush and clean it. It's because it's been up for so long and will be up for longer. Anyway, this is what I'm doing with the French. I don't think the Russians want to continue the war particularly, so I think they'll just let it go this time. They're basically getting nothing out of it, and continuing fighting I don't see helping them, except the fact that we may not be able to beat France. But the Turks managed to capture Odessa, which they had already sieged. The army took whatever this is, Nemenov, and then Kiev also fell to a small force. This would be very, very powerful if I could convert it into anything of value, but I really can't. It's just sort of we might as well try taking stuff, but I don't know why. I don't know what I'm going to gain out of it. But maybe something useful comes of it. At the very least, I don't know. The Russian army is just going to be able to chase me back out. So it really doesn't make much difference. Looking, these two chits are going to be huge because almost nothing's moved. So now I've got to move all the French everywhere. So we moved the army of Germany and the Poles together. Now Sushant's in charge, so he can't incorporate the Polish forces into his army. And then up here, we gathered the army of Spain, which is here. It could absorb any one of these, but not more than that. So I'm in kind of a weird sort of situation where I don't really want to move my forces terribly. I don't know about the Swiss detachment. Like, detachments are so fucking weird because they're just, by the rules as written, they're just basically replacement points, but you kind of can't use them. Like, but they operate fine outside of armies for some strange reason, and it's just too weird for me to cope with. I could move him. I don't see anywhere I want to. I kind of want him out of the way of anything, because if he's in a fortress that the Austrians could reach or something, they can destroy it. There's no real advantage to defending a fortress with more troops against army-sized forces. Against small forces, yes, it does serve some purpose, but there aren't a lot of small forces out there trying to scoop stuff up right now. Anyway, I'm stopping here in large part because of the lighting. The lighting is just so bad when the sun's coming through there, and then it's going to get too fucking hot, and I just don't know what to do. Up here doing the last chit of this turn, which is a coalition one, and I moved the Spaniards. We're already seeing this problem happening over here, where I'm out of Turkish markers. Yeah, maybe there's another one kicking around somewhere, but I'm also now out of Spanish markers. The control markers are insufficient in this game for what they have to do. And the fact that they're like so many nationalities, some of which, as far as I can tell, shouldn't even have control markers, like Swedes and Bavarians and stuff like that. Yeah, you could make an argument that like the Bavarian one is because Bavaria will have Tyrol or something like that. Okay, you know, to indicate the territory they control rather than fortresses. But then you don't have the markers for the fortresses. So I'm using like Italians and Austrians and all kind of other stuff because the Spaniards aren't supposed to take as much territory as they've taken. Anyway, this is particularly problematic down here because I moved the Spaniards out of Montpellier, which I'm actually allowed to do. If they were allied in the same block, they could move together and that would be fine. But otherwise, I have to follow the diplomatic order, which puts Spain before Britain. Technically, the Russians should go first. I want to think about their decision, and they don't really impact much. They're probably not going to attack. But here I've got, you know, a couple of British markers. There aren't a lot of British control markers in the game. I've got the Spaniards with other things mixed in, an Italian and an Austrian, like I said. I've got an Italian over there. It's just a mess. It's really hard to tell what's going on. But the fact that here there's actually some room for ambiguity is more problematic. Next I focus in this general area. Oh, I forgot to move him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to there, whatever. Where Wellington takes Hanover and destroyed the Saxon forces, And the Austrians have moved in. They're working on Saxony itself, but they haven't captured it yet. Taking over Bavaria and marching in here, we took Baden and the Palatinate. Now, Baden, I believe, yeah, Baden was conquered, which means the only way I can get it from France is to force France to surrender. I can't, you know, which feels really weird to me, right? Feels like I should be able to reestablish the miners just by occupying their territory, you know, because whatever treaties were accomplished, you know, to absorb them are pretty iffy in terms of like the rest of Europe accepting them, which is to say that, you know, I could just reinstall the ruler, but that's not the way this works. Once the territory's been absorbed into France, it's part of France and can't be taken back except through a peace, and that peace is tricky to do, and it's actually probably the least desirable stuff to take. The things you want to actually take are things that you could seize. I don't know. But whatever, in terms of that. The Russians, I think, are going to just pass. I think they've decided it's not worth fighting on at this point, which means we're not going to have any attrition, but we are going to have the Russians surrender and the French get to take their picks. Because Russia just, I can't face all these armies, and I'm just going to get more and more weakened relative to whatever Austria might gain here, or Britain might gain, or Spain for that matter. Spain's chance of victory in this game at this point is pretty close to nothing. They had a potential shot at it if they took Portugal, you know, and then we're fighting France. But at this point, maybe they want to align with France more because they can't win that war of liberation because there are no French troops in Spain, and there won't be. Fuck, sometimes I read things all wrong. I found this here. Victor can propose mandatory alliance. This is two-piece conditions. It's not really available to me, but the vanquished power grants the use of territory to the victor. The victor still has to maintain his own supply lines, but can use the defeated power's fortresses as supply links. And I said, wait a minute, that's kind of what I've been doing. What's up with that? And then I look back here, and the defeated country's fortresses can be used neither as supply links nor as supply sources. I have this tendency to read things like that and not absorb them properly. Given that I took Poland from Prussia, that's not an issue there. But it was an issue with the Austrian surrender. When Austria surrendered, I was using their fortresses to leverage my way into Prussia. I probably had enough depots I could manage things, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But yeah, that seems to be the main thing that being allied gives you, is the fortresses going through them. And I wouldn't have even been able to impose that victory condition. But I don't know that I needed to. I guess I'm looking at territorial concessions for the most part. I'm definitely taking the continental system. Indemnities. Do I need them? I don't have a lot of lost French units, and I'm not really counting on having a hell of a lot. So that doesn't seem worth it. Getting a couple of Russian corps on my side, not really that valuable. I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to allow myself to take Polish provinces to reincorporate a larger Poland. Not allowed within the game. You're only allowed to create out of, I guess, the 3 that the final Polish territory was. I'm using more of an empires in arms type view to allow you to establish a larger Poland. It's essentially out of the game. I rolled a big 12 on their when do they get to come back. That's going to be autumn of 1815. The game ends in 1814, so they're gone. All they have left is, you know, maybe defeat Turkey or something. And we gave up Podolia, Polesia, and Lithuania to the Poles, which creates, you know, a huge Poland, but it definitely takes victory points away from Russia. And those are victory points that maybe somebody else can get by conquering Poland. The problem is the conquest of this is, again, an ugly thing. Were there any Russian miners? I am trying to think of, is there anything Russia would want here? That's Turkish. No, the Russians own nothing. Great. Okay. So there was no option there. But a miner with more than one province is, if their capital is taken, they surrender and they give a province away. But I think they can also be defeated by everything taken. Now, this is weird because I believe that you can take a miner with more than one province out of the war, not in the winter phase. They will surrender one territory under those conditions. The normal conditions is the capital, basically all of its fortresses have to be taken. But it's kind of weird here. The conqueror chooses one province adjacent to his. The diplomacy marker, the minor country, cannot declare war on each other for 4 turns. Alternatively, the major power that controls the minor can propose a peace as soon as the invader controls one province. Everything's just so fucked up. You know, I mean, these totally different rules that don't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, you could strip a province away from the Poles, but nobody can go to war with Poland without going to war with France. So, you know, there you have that. So yeah, Russia will be part of the continental system for the remainder of the game, and they're giving away a big chunk of territory, so they're going to be relatively low because they'll have negative victory points for those territories that they just lost, and they're just not going to be in good shape at all. On the bright side, and this is why you need these fortresses, because France has just gotten thrown out of supply by winning this war. When you win a war, you don't get teleported out, if I recall correctly. Oh, wow, the defeated power's fortresses are reactivated for free. So, I don't believe that there's anything that forces the French troops out, but now they're out of supply because I can't trace supply through their things. And that's just horrible, right? I mean, that doesn't make any fucking sense. So I'm going to neglect that. Take all of these markers off. Hey, maybe we got ones that are useful. We got a Turkish one. That'll replace an Italian one. We got bunches of Brits. I think I'm okay with Brits. I think it's only Spaniards I need, and I don't have any of those. So yeah, I mean, the French have to be able to use those fortresses to at least withdraw, and it's just stupid as far as I'm concerned. All right, that will be the end of this turn and probably the end of me playing for some time. Put this back here. I don't know what I'm gonna do after. Well, I do know what I'm gonna do. Play some musket and pike is what I'm gonna do. But in terms of the video, I think I'll just use the other camera or something. I don't know. I woke up to some kind of really annoying stuff going on in the pavilion. Apparently, I guess, older high school guys, a whole bunch of them in some kind of class type setting, but playing some kind of games involving a tennis ball or something. But it was kind of a learning thing. But man, just, I mean, much as I hate people, there's a certain, you know, that younger male, not younger male adults kind of, yeah, they're still there. It's got to be about the most absolutely annoying type of people in general. Just so fucking loud, cheering each other and all this. And I'm sure they were encouraged to do so, but it's just like, why would you have to be that loud? Anyway, it's right around 100 degrees right now. I'm going to load this up, even though I only got one season in on this video. That gets me a clear slate for whatever else I do. And we'll come back to this, you know, when the weather's a little cooler. Speaking of that kind of boisterous noisiness and everything, you know, they're still going. They're just quieter, you know. But I can hear them back there. I was never that way. Like, I would go to ball games and whatnot, and I wouldn't be cheering or anything. I'd be, you know, just that kind of thing. To me, it's almost the antithesis of everything that I've always kind of believed, which is, hey, fucking keep things quiet and calm, and you know, don't interfere, don't in any way kind of annoy others if you can help it, right? Now, the if you can help it is kind of a big deal there. But yeah, in terms of like, it does not improve my enjoyment or anything to do that. And I'm actually kind of shocked that people are still that way. You know, it almost, like in a lot of ways, I feel like the world has moved in my direction in terms of like, you know, the way that people are more disconnected and on their phones and alone and all that. It feels like it's catching up with me. And of course they say, you know, that's the problems or whatever. That's something we should fix. But it is kind of interesting to see that the fucking apes are still around.